And now it's my pleasure to introduce our commencement speaker. I'm deeply honored today to present you this teacher, scholar, mentor, national leader, and inspiration, Dr. Gerry House. Gerry House is President and CEO of the Institute for Student Achievement, a nonprofit organization that partners with schools and districts to transform failing public high schools into academically rigorous schools that graduate students prepared for success in college. A nationally respected educator, Dr. House was the superintendent of schools for 15 years, first in Chapel Hill and then in Memphis, Tennessee. In 1999, she was named the National Superintendent of the Year for her work in Memphis. In the year 2000, she was the first recipient of the Distinguished Leadership Award from our School of Education. Dr. House joined ISA in 2000 as its president and CEO. Under her leadership, ISA has become known for turning around some of the most challenging high schools in the nation, including schools in New York City, Detroit, and Atlanta. She serves on numerous boards, including the Board of Trustees of the Educational Testing Service, where she formerly was chair, the Adelphi University Board of Trustees, the Harlem Success Charter Network Board, and the Woodrow Wilson Foundation Board of Directors. The Carolina School of Education, she serves as a member of the Board of Directors of the School of Education Foundation. Dr. House holds a doctorate in Education Administration from our School of Education. So I would like to welcome her to the podium.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, McDermott, for that very generous introduction. These past 2 days have proven that Thomas Brooke was wrong. You can indeed go home again, at least for a little while. It is wonderful being back on the Chapel Hill campus, and from the perspectives of time and distance, I am remembering only the good moments, the rich learning experiences, the incredible professors, and the meaningful relationships. Now, before I'm reminded of my statistics classes and holding down a full-time job while working on a doctorate and struggling to finish a dissertation that did not want to be written, I'll be back in New York reflecting on how much I enjoyed my time here at my alma mater, and particularly the pleasure of sharing this occasion with each of you. I will also remind myself that the commencement speaker can indeed be a fond part of the memory of this day if she speaks only for a little while. And since I truly want to be remembered as brief, if nothing else, I promise to take my seat before I become the one thing that you do not wish to remember about this day. One of my favorite things when I was growing up was for my family to all pile in the car and drive to Eaton, North Carolina to visit my grandparents. It was really only 30 miles from our house to theirs, but in 1960 it seemed like going to a faraway land, and it seemed to take forever to get there. My sisters, my brothers, and I knew every landmark from our door to our grandparents' door. Now, many years later, I took that trip again from the house where I grew up to my grandparents' former home. The magical trip that used to take forever took about 20 minutes on the expressway. And one of our favorite landmarks in our youth was what we called the White Fence. And that was the name for acres of white fenced farmland where beautiful horses grazed. Surprisingly, a commemorative section of the white fence was still there, but the farmland and the horses had been replaced by modern subdivisions filled with mat mansions. When I finally arrived at their house, there was a for sale sign on a vacant lot. I sat in the car for a few minutes, feeling more and more disoriented. All of the old landmarks and the guideposts had been replaced with strange, unfamiliar ones. Even time itself seemed to have changed. A trip that felt like it took forever in the past, in the present, took no longer than a typical drive to the shopping mall. It took me a while to accept that the entire landscape of a significant part of my life had changed. What had been would be no more. And just as my personal journey revealed significant changes along the route to my grandparents' home, as educators, you are embarking on a professional journey where many of the old landmarks that guided educators who came before you have changed, and in some cases disappeared altogether. You are beginning or enriching your careers at a time when the old education institution is rapidly being dismantled and the new institution has not yet been completely designed. When you leave here today, you'll go to your classrooms, your schools, your districts, or your other pursuits better prepared to do your job well, to design and deliver better lessons, to run higher performing schools, to prepare better teachers, and to improve systems, policies, and processes. And as you go about this critically important work, please remember that you are really doing this and so much more. You are the photographers and navigators of a new educational landscape. You must show us how to create schools that prepare every child for a productive, prosperous future in a global society driven by technology. This is obviously not an easy task, but it is a necessary one. The work on which you now embark is actually sacred work. I am confident that each of you will do your jobs well, but the job that we all are counting on you to do is so much bigger, and nothing less than the future of our society is at stake. Before I share with you some of my thoughts about how this can be done, let me take just a moment and remind you that gifted, committed educators like you have done this work before. In a policy paper on U.S. education, the McGraw-Hill Research Foundation reminds us that we were the first country to offer every child the opportunity to obtain a free public secondary education. And as the nation as a whole reaped tremendous economic rewards for this policy decision at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th centuries. By the mid-1940s, the U.S. could take pride in having the best educated workforce in the world. Because of the GI Bill, we also led the world with the number of people earning post-secondary, college, and university degrees after World War II. And this fueled yet another period of economic growth in the 1950s and 60s. And in the late 1960s, the baby boomers just assumed that they would go to college. By the end of the 1970s, a college degree was viewed as the most important factor in obtaining not just a job, but a career and an economically secure one. And as we know, a college degree is still the greatest predictor of an economically secure life for today's young people. The problem is that too many of them drop out before earning a high school diploma, and too few who do graduate are actually prepared to live and work productively over a lifetime in the new cyber society. The breadth, depth, and speed of technology have had a huge impact on every aspect of our lives. We send text messages to the person sitting right next to us, and I bet some of you are guilty of doing that right now. LOL and OMG have been added to Webster's dictionary. And it took Charlie Sheen only 25 hours and 17 minutes to establish the Guinness World Record of the fastest time to reach 1 million Twitter followers. And I suspect some of you find that about as disturbing as I do. It is true that much progress has been made toward our young people becoming educated enough to be globally competitive. There are classrooms, schools, and even a few school systems where most, if not all, children are prepared for the 21st century. However, it is equally true that not one of these is an urban or a rural system that serves children who live in poverty.